Hi, welcome back. In this video, I'm gonna walk you through the entire drawing process of this realistic cat using graphite pencils. So let's get started. As always, these are the art supplies I'm going to use for this drawing, and you can pause the video right here to note them down. I'm using this 250 GSM paper from my ordinary smooth surface sketchbook, which is available in almost all the art stores or stationeries around the world. So you don't have to use any fancy paper for this specific drawing. And the drawing portion area is 11 x 14 inches. I drew the outline using grid method, and you can find the detailed step-by-step process from making the grid to outlining on my Patreon profile. Link is in the description. I've also masked the edges during the outlining process using a masking tape to prevent the graphite from spilling over the borders. Okay, so let's start the shading process, and I'm starting the process by filling the background using an HB graphite powder. I'm using a bigger size toy brush and moving my hand in circular scribbling motions to thoroughly fill this area. Keep on layering the powder until you achieve the required darkness. Now to make the background look even more blended, I'm going over it using a soft tissue paper. And look how smooth and even it has started to look. Now let's move on to the next portion, and I decided to add a 3D base layer in the whole cat. And for that, I'm scraping my 8B pencil and placing the powder over the areas that are darker and have shadows. Now let's blend them over the darker areas first using a medium-sized toy brush to make sure the powder doesn't spill over the other areas. And by the way, you can get access to our premium content and support this channel through Patreon. You can sign up through different membership levels and get access to all the outlines and grid references, etc. We have an ever-growing library of hundreds of exclusive and real-time tutorials. And you will also get access to 4 new tutorials every month. You can also post your artworks in our active community of patrons and participate in our weekly critique sessions where I give my honest and positive critiques on your artworks, so you can improve your skills and get better with your drawing. Visit the link in description and become a premium member today. It has always been my goal to provide free tutorials and information on drawing and art related tools to general public. And keeping with that theme, I would like to thank all these incredible individuals who backed our channel on Patreon last month. Their generous support enabled me to produce this free tutorial for all of you guys. Okay, so when all the dark areas are done, start blending the leftover powder over the whole portion using a bigger size toy brush. To make the base even more smooth and even, I'm thoroughly going over the whole cat portion using tissue paper. And this will blend the graphite along with embedding it into the place, giving you the perfect 3D base as required. Now let's start the detailing process, and as always, I'm starting from this top left portion. And this portion has some darker hair as well, so I'm firstly adding these thin strokes by flicking my pencil very carefully. I'm using my 8B pencil with a sharp tip while adding these strokes to avoid blunt and thick fur later on. Notice that I'm only going over the darker areas along the edge of this ear and changing the direction of these strokes depending upon the area I'm working on. Now I'm lightly going over these strokes using my medium-sized toy brush to blend them with the surroundings. When the basic darker texture is in place, it's time to add the lighter first stroke. And for that, I'm using my flat tip mono zero eraser. I'm carefully going over and in between the darker strokes, and look how detailed the fur has started to look. So make sure to change the length and direction of these strokes depending upon the area you're working on. And try not to add too many of these uniform strokes, as too much uniformity in such natural textures make the area look flat instead of realistic. Make sure to keep your mono zero eraser clean and sharp at all times during this entire erasing process. You can rub it vertically on sandpaper and you will achieve sharp corners all around the tip that are perfect for adding thin highlights, and you also don't have to sharpen the tip again and again. Just rotate the eraser and keep erasing until all the sharp corners are used. As I move away from the edge of the ear, I'm gradually increasing the size of these first strokes and adding bigger and slightly curved ones as required. For the bottom portion of the ear, I'm changing the direction of these strokes and flicking my eraser to achieve the desired results. The lower portion lacks some depth, so I'm adding these strokes close together to create the required darkness. And I'm using my 8B pencil for this purpose, and I will lightly blend it afterwards to achieve a smooth finish. After adding the previous layer, some of the brighter strokes faded away. So I'm going back and forth with my tools until I am fully satisfied with the fur texture. For the top portion of the head, I'm using the same mono zero eraser and flicking it upwards to achieve the required fur strokes. Make sure to flick your eraser in one go to achieve smooth strokes without any deformities. And don't forget to change the direction and angle of the strokes by keeping the natural flow of fur in mind. Moving on to the right ear, and I'm following the similar method of detailing and texturing just like the way I did for the left one. Keep on adding these strokes using your mono zero eraser until whole area is filled with white fur. Okay, so for the forehead portion, I'm firstly picking up the excess graphite from the lighter areas using my kneaded eraser. I have shaped it into a round thin tip and now tapping it over the required areas to add blended highlights to the base. It will create the required 3D base perfect to add fur later on. I accidentally added highlights over the darker area, so I'm adjusting it by adding depth to it using my 8B pencil, and I will blend it later on. Keep on tapping the eraser until the required highlights are achieved. Now when the base highlights are done, grab your mono zero eraser and start flicking it in one go. And as we are working on the darker base, the graphite tends to stick to the tip. So keep on cleaning it after every few strokes to increase its effectiveness. I'm following the similar process and adding these strokes of random length and direction by keeping the natural flow of fur in mind. Notice that while working on the shadow portion, I'm slightly increasing the distance between the strokes to give it a more realistic effect. Otherwise, the whole area will start to look monotone and flat. I'm also adding some filling strokes using my F or HP graphite pencil to give the white fur more realistic look where required. Notice that the strokes near the nose are relatively smaller in size, so I'm adjusting their length accordingly. When the basic fur strokes are done, I'm now adding some brighter ones using an electric eraser. I'm going in between and over the previous strokes to make them look more prominent and realistic. I'm also adding some bigger size strokes where required to give it a more natural look. You can always go back and adjust the details where required until you are fully satisfied with the outcome. Okay, so let's move on to the eyes, and as always, I'm darkening the pupil and strokes respectively using my 8B pencil. I'm also adding a mixture of curved and straight lines to mimic the iris texture and details. When the darker texture is in place, lightly blend it using a medium-sized dry brush. Now it's time to add the highlights, and I'm using my flat tip mono zero eraser and going along this curved line. I am also adding some softer curved strokes in between the darker ones, and look how realistic it has started to look, just like the way we needed here. For the reflection in the pupil, I'm shifting towards the electric eraser and adding these brighter strokes where required. I'm also using my jelly roll pen and going over these reflection highlights to make the eye look more watery and shiny. But you can skip this step if your highlights look just fine. I was trying to add bright fur above the eye, but it didn't turn out the way I needed here. So you can skip these steps for now. You can just add brighter strokes using an electric eraser over this darker base, and then adjust the thickness of these brighter strokes by adding darker ones right beside them. This will make them appear thin along with adding the required depth. The small portion of the nose is looking dull, so I'm shading the area first to give it a nice depth, and then adding lighter and darker fur strokes respectively. Moving on to the right eye, and I'm following the similar steps I followed earlier for the left eye. I'm also adding a few bigger size strokes above the eye using my B pencil. And look how these few intricate details made the whole area look realistic. Now let's move on to my favorite part of this drawing, and that is the nose detailing. And first of all, I'm darkening the tip of it using 8B pencil. As we can see in the reference image that the nose portion has more black fur as compared to the rest of the face. So to mimic such an effect, I'm adding darker strokes using my 8B pencil. As we know that the texture of fur on the nose is a little bit different, so I'm keeping the length of the strokes relatively smaller. Also, I've divided the lower portion of the nose into two sections vertically in my mind. And now I'm adding these strokes on the left portion slightly tilted towards the right side. And then for the right side, I'm changing the direction and tilting them towards the left side. And that is how we can exactly trace the pattern and flow of fur in this specific portion. I'm also adding this darker fur texture under the left eye and cheek portion using the same 8B pencil. Make sure to change the length of these strokes according to the area you're working on. Some areas are looking dull, so I'm layering 8B graphite powder over them using my medium-sized toy brush until I'm satisfied with the darkness. I'm following the similar method of adding darker fur strokes for the right side as I did earlier for the left one. The only difference here is that I'm going over some strokes with a brush to achieve a blended effect. Now it's time to add the highlights, and I'm following the similar process as I did for the upper portion. I'm using my Mono Zero Eraser with a flat tip to create such thin yet sharp strokes, just like the way we needed here. Again, make sure to change the length and direction of these strokes depending upon the area you're working on. And also try to avoid overlapping these lighter strokes over the darker ones, or else it will make the whole area look more bright and flat. For the areas which are brighter, I'm layering more strokes to achieve the required results. Keep on adding these lighter strokes until the whole required portion is filled. For this right edge of the cheek, I started adding the lighter strokes directly, and they didn't turn out the way I wanted. So you can skip this part as I will erase it later on. Okay, so for this portion, you can firstly add darker texture, just like the way we did earlier for the cheeks, and then flick your Mono Zero Eraser and add these needle-like thin fur strokes. And look how beautiful the texture has started to look. I'm going back and forth with my tools to add final touches to the lighter and darker fur details, until I'm fully satisfied with this texture. The nose has a very soft and subtle highlight, so to achieve such an effect, I'm keeping the pressure low on my eraser and adding these curved highlights respectively. And these small details will make the nose look more shiny and 3D. This left side of the face has slightly bigger size fur strokes, so I'm adding them accordingly using my Mono Zero Eraser. The fur on the body looks a bit blurry, so to achieve such an effect, I've kneaded my eraser into a thin tip. And now I'm flicking it like this to add these thin strokes respectively. As we know that the texture of a kneaded eraser is kind of sticky, so make sure not to apply too much pressure on it, or else it will start to stick to the paper. Keep on adding these blended strokes for the whole body portion. By using a Mono Zero Eraser, I'm adding a few brighter and longer strokes on the chin to achieve a realistic effect. For the body, I'm switching towards my Perfection Eraser and following the similar flicking method to add thin yet softer strokes. Make sure to clean the tip of your Perfection Eraser more oftenly while working on darker areas to achieve better results. I'm going back and forth with my eraser and adding the required fur details in this section. For the right edge of the body, I'm adding these brighter strokes using a Mono Zero Eraser, just like the way I added on the face portion. Okay, so let's move on to a very interesting part, which is the whiskers. And for that, I'm using a flat tip Mono Zero Eraser and adding these longer strokes. I'm starting from the base and gradually flicking my eraser as I move away from the mouth portion to avoid blunt ends. And also keep the length and direction of these strokes random to achieve realistic results. Too much uniformity in such strokes take the essence of realism away from the drawing. Notice that I'm keeping the pressure on my eraser variable to achieve brighter and softer strokes, which help in creating a 3D texture effectively. And again, don't forget to clean the tip of your eraser more frequently while working on such intricate details to increase its effectiveness. When the base strokes are in place, it's time to make them even more bright. And for that, I'm using my electric razor with a sharp, thin tip and carefully going over them. And look how bright and crisp they have started to look, just like the way we want it here. I'm also adding a few new ones in between the previous ones to give the whole texture a more cohesive look. Okay, so now to make some of these strokes pop up even more, I'm using my sharp tip B pencil and going along a few whiskers. And look how this darker stroke right beside the lighter one makes it appear more 3D and realistic. For the whiskers on the right side, I'm following the similar process and adding these strokes using my eraser and pencils. And with this last step, we are done with this super easy cat drawing. Creating these free tutorials needs a significant amount of time and energy. So if you found this one valuable, please show your support by liking this video. Your support keeps me inspired to bring you more creative content. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.